All right, well, John already did the introduction, so. All right, well, would you like to elaborate a little bit about what you do at Bloomberg News?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm very loud, so I probably don't even need a microphone, especially for a small space like this. Pleasure to be here today. So my name's Chris Marino. I oversee performance, marketing, and media at Bloomberg Media. And my function is really focused on three specific areas. As some of you may know, and as our friend just mentioned, I'm surprised Bloomberg News has a head of performance marketing and media. Well, the subscriptions are not going to sell themselves, unfortunately, or I'd be out of a job. But so three focus areas for me. I oversee all of full funnel media off-site, so my team is responsible for growing brand awareness, helping people to see Bloomberg as more than just a terminal business, but as a news business, driving consideration for our suite of subscriptions products that are based on Bloomberg.com, but then also focused on actually converting that audience, whether the conversion happened directly or is assisted in another place. The second part of my role is focused on marketing technology. So as consumer privacy, consumer data protection continues to increase, the efficacy and efficiency of our marketing is being challenged, right? So really thinking about how do we create a tech stack that's going to help us future-proof the revenue that we have at risk today with the changes and also accelerate growth. And then the third piece of my team's responsibility is streaming. So we have a 24/7 live streaming network. It's called Bloomberg Quick Take. We have recently started to get into more original series content. So we just launched a show, How I Got Here with Chris Paul. The idea is really Chris Paul meeting with influential people within the industry, Mark Cuban, Byron Allen, so on and so forth, targeted towards a younger demographic. All of our video content is free. We really use that as an entry point to get that younger demographic in the door so we can start to do more with them. So that's a little bit about my role. It feels like three very distinct roles at other companies, having spent 10 years at American Express and worked at Instagram after that. But that was kind of one of the really attracting opportunities about Bloomberg, was being a part of a very well-known, globally recognized brand, but building something new and different within that context.
Very cool and very interesting. I had no idea that you guys were involved in so many different aspects. Well, I suppose Cookie Monster said it first. No more cookies, and the cookie stresses me out, or the lack thereof. Our industry is facing the same challenge. So everyone's struggling and stressing out, right? We're trying to figure out the best way to model, target, and track attribution for their advertising campaigns in a cookieless world. So over time, we've adopted various different attribution models as the industry has evolved. One of the earlier ones and kind of the simplest forms is UTM tracking, where you pass back the UTM parameter through some sort of a click action. The problem there is that you're unable to see view through attribution. Well, how many times have you seen an ad for the first time, clicked on it, and purchased a product? My hunch is probably not very often. Then there was the adoption of the cookie. The cookie had, some very promising initial results, although the big issue there is the cross-device attribution piece, right? And then it evolved to various different forms of cross-device or fingerprinting approaches, which are typically not very privacy friendly. So as mobile usage has exploded, there's been an increasing need for tracking cross-device attribution. Although, with all these privacy efforts, protecting consumer privacy becoming very important within our industry, there's been major backlash in that regard. So we've seen efforts on two fronts. On the consumer side, there's been an increase in awareness and sensitivity in online tracking, as well as increased usage in VPN and incognito browsing. And then on the corporate side, companies such as Apple, which was mentioned earlier, they're making it increasingly difficult to be able to track users on their devices by basically disabling tracking of cookies, IP addresses, and UTM parameters, as well as offering free VPN usage. Then there are other companies such as Google, and they are basically deploying their own consumer privacy features as well, right? So they are also offering free VPN usage for certain accounts, as well as the deprecation of the cookie, which pretty much brings us to our topic today about attribution in a cookieless world. So what do we do in today's world? How do we remain privacy friendly to our consumers while still being able to accurately track attribution? And so that brings me to my first question, Chris. What is Bloomberg planning in this, evolvement of the cookieless world? How are you basically modeling out your attribution?
Yeah, big question. I have all the answers. Don't worry. No, in all seriousness, I think from my perspective, as a marketer, at first, I think people are very overwhelmed with this change. But when I go back to the root of what marketing is actually responsible for, it's being the champion of the customer. Because no one in a company is putting the customer at the center of everything that they do, especially if marketing is not. And so I think this is a really positive change for consumers, which is actually good for business in the long term. I think one of the things that we're really thinking about is, from my perspective, as attribution changes, data starts to become more important than ever. And owning your data and being less reliant on other platforms for data is at the core and center of the strategy. And it's not as easy to collect data as we might think, right? There are some companies who have really sexy products that lend themselves to easily collect data. Look at Chipotle giving free burritos out for email addresses, or ABI giving a free beer out for an email address. It's a little bit challenging when you're in different industries. And what that really goes at the core to is, how do you create a value exchange for a user to actually give you their email in exchange for something? And in the Bloomberg business, what we're really thinking about is, how do we start creating a registration experience for our users? And so, historically, a user may come to the site and you're going to hit a paywall. But before you hit that paywall, how do we start to give you access to free content so you can experience the brand? Why do I think this is a good thing? We're going to reach more high-intent users. Data quality is going to be inherently higher, right? When you think about a pixel, it sounds great in theory, but in reality, it's not very accurate. And you start to see that play out from an efficiency perspective in the marketing standpoint. And so I think the first piece is putting data at the core of your strategy. I think the second piece is bringing cross-functional partners along on the journey. And that is really hard to do, especially when you are dealing with privacy, legal. And what I would say is, the challenge that marketers are facing is, I don't think that those cross-functional partners understood the industry well enough before all of the changes. And now we're in the middle of a dramatic change where you need to bring these partners along. And so making sure they have a seat at the table, making sure they're a part of those conversations, and really co-creating the experience. The third piece is getting leadership buy-in, right? Another really big challenge. And I just want to underpin, marketers are under a tremendous headwind here. This is why you're seeing the CMO role have such short tenure, in my opinion, because marketing is being asked to do a lot. But what I think from a marketing perspective is really important is ensuring that your senior leaders are really well versed in not just understanding the business dynamics today, but setting the organization up for long-term growth. And I think a lot of these changes are a shift in mindset for, how do you manage not just in-year growth, but how do you manage long-term growth? And I think what you're going to start to see is the rise of more brand and mid-funnel content, right, designed to help the user fall in love with a brand, and really understand the depth of the product before they're hit with all of these acquisition messages, which is what the industry has been very dominated by. And so I think it's a multifaceted approach that we're trying to take, one that involves having a lot of folks at the table to drive stepwise change to what the future should look like.
So that's a very interesting outlook. How do you think people within your organization are going to basically accept these changes? And do you think that they're going to trust the results from performance? How do you think they're going to view that?
Yeah, I think in any organization, to some extent, paid is always going to be a really big line item. And more often than not, I think your finance counterparts are never going to be thrilled with what the ROI looks like. I think what's really important is bringing on the right infrastructure that's going to allow you to better quantify the impact of those marketing efforts. And so there's two things that I've been really focused on from a MarTech perspective. The first is it's not just about collecting the data and having the data hygiene, but it's also having an infrastructure that's going to allow you to scale the use of that data offsite and to create a more omni-channel experience for that end user, because customers don't see channels, they see brands. And so how do you show up more consistently, and how do you create the infrastructure that's actually going to allow you to deliver personalization at scale? So that's one piece of the equation. The second piece that I'm incredibly bullish on is marketing mix modeling. And so our company had not had reliance on MTA historically, and I think given MTA's incredible reliance on cookies, I am much more bullish on MMM models. But MMM models are really helping us to get a lot more sophisticated with how we think about measurement, overlaying not just a performance view, but a macro view, right? Really helping business leaders to understand, as you scale up, as you scale down, where do you reach diminishing returns? Where are the growth opportunities for the organization? And how do you think about paid, which is one of the main channels I oversee, driving growth for the entire organization, agnostic of where that growth actually happens? I think that's what's really important. People have looked at things from a very channel-centric view, but channels working together to drive more efficient performance is what I think the most important thing is in the industry, and that's a view of helping our leadership get there, right? And so I would argue measurement is far from perfect today, so I think it's helping the leaders understand where we are facing challenges and helping them understand how new measurement models actually help unlock more opportunity for the business. And those things have helped us launch our first brand campaign at scale. Before, brand wasn't something that we were really focused on at scale, right? Thinking about it as more of a performance branding strategy. So how do we reach new users that we would have otherwise never reached with our current acquisition messages? How do we grow retargeting pool, right? How do we get more people to the website? How do you deliver lifts in pre and post brand search? Really thinking about what are the right leading indicators that are going to help sell in what these strategies are going to look like more in the long term.
I imagine it's going to be a bit difficult to try to get everybody on board, or kind of, everyone on the same page as far as which are the best efforts or approach for this. I think there's still a lot of unknowns within the industry and how things are going to roll out, or even being able to predict what's going to generate the best performance or view on this whole attribution piece. I think there's still a lot of questions out there. And
I think to that point, no one has the answers, but just putting test and learn at the core of everything that you are doing. So one of the really interesting tests that we've recently just run is we've started to onboard a CDP. We have historically been very reliant on cookies, right, to the point where it was eye-opening for our leadership to understand just how much revenue is associated with that. As we've started to use more of our own data that customers have actually opted into, we're seeing match rates increase significantly. I won't give a number, but enough to make a substantive difference in how we run our program and drive efficiency. So I think the model, as I think about it, is one, test and learn. Two, figuring out who are the right people that you actually need to get on the same page, because within any organization, there's a few decision makers that actually hold the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. And then three, ensuring that you're bringing them along, both in terms of some of those short-term wins where you're helping them to see the value of these long-term investments that they're making, and also giving them a seat at the table as you're architecting that experience.
Sure. So, as you're kind of deploying these new attribution methods, what do you anticipate, or have you, I don't know if you've already kind of started to roll these out, but what do you foresee as challenges as far as running campaigns? What obstacles do you think you'll face?
Yeah, I think for me, it's reimagining a lot of the campaigns that we are running in a more integrated manner, right? So, one of the things that I've been really focused on is growing our mid funnel marketing. And the reason that I've been focused on growing mid-funnel from a campaign perspective is when you lead with acquisition messages, your users don't actually understand the value of your product. And so I've rolled out a number of new campaigns that are designed to simply educate and surprise and delight the user. So in a news business, one of our main assets is newsletters. The primary reason that folks come to subscribe is for our journalism. How do we use newsletters as a vehicle to give free content to a user so they can experience the brand? And we know that once a user signs up for a newsletter, not only are they more likely to convert on the product in the long term, but they're more likely to stay with us. And that's really important in a subscription business where at the end of month 3, your price goes from $1.99 to $34.99. Right, so really thinking about how are you bringing in the right users, which I would say is a big tenet to the overall strategy. The second piece is mobile app, and so we've been really rethinking our mobile app in terms of where we're seeing consumption happen. And from a marketing perspective, we recently brought on an MMP. An MMP is allowing us to measure our marketing efforts in a more substantive way. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to get users on our app, because once they're on our app, we know they are much more highly engaged. They're much more likely to read content, and they're much more likely to give us their data because it's a value exchange. There's something there, right? The third piece is social first content franchises, or what I call them. So a lot of times, a lot of publishers link you out to, you see an article promoted within a feed, you have to click on that article. When you click on that article, you hit a paywall. That's really not necessarily designed for social environments, right? And so thinking about how do we deploy social first content franchises? So I'll give you an example. We launched a crypto vertical in January where we really scaled crypto as an area of coverage for Bloomberg. And one of the things that we were focused on was how do we build brand equity around Bloomberg being the expert within the crypto space? And how do we give users really interesting statistics within their feed that are more social first in nature, that are going to help them get more educated, that are going to help them have smarter conversations with their friends, and that are going to help them think about Bloomberg as an expert, right? And so when I talk about campaigns, we're really thinking about the customer more, and we're putting the customer more at the center of what we do, and thinking about what is the right infrastructure that's going to create, as I'm learning about crypto on social or in email or wherever I go, I have this cohesive thread that's building on how I've engaged with the brand. Those are some of the things we're thinking through, right? Is really how do you deliver more value in a way that complements your product? So by the time someone gets to a product, they're actually primed and ready for conversion.
So, and this is a little bit off the whole attribution thing, but you mentioned something that just kind of brought curiosity. So would you consider your valuable customers or, subscribers, what are the things that they are doing that kind of expresses that or identifies that for you?
Yeah, I think a valuable subscriber is someone that's making the most use of the product. And so you're coming to the website multiple times a day. When you're on the website, you're viewing many different pages, right? You're subscribed to a number of different newsletters. You have the mobile app. I think one of the main jobs of marketers is ensuring that your customers see the clear value of what your product is actually delivering. And that's a lot of what our marketing messages are focused on. And so to me, the best customer is someone that gets the most value out of the product, and we make that value easy to discover, so you are taking advantage of it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. All right, well, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So if anyone has questions for Chris, please feel free to, looks like we have.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
We have someone.
Don't sing. Yeah.
You might top my voice.
No singing. Actually, I don't have a question. I want to throw some kudos to you. So my wife is an investment banker. So she lives and breathes Bloomberg every day. I just had a text exchange with her. She recently, this is a kudos to you guys, of taking somebody in the B2B world, converting her to B2C. So she actually subscribes to it on her personal email address and everything else because she is hungry for consuming content outside of the office. So I just wanted to throw you some kudos about converting an investment banker from her daily activity to consuming content when she's off hours.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
So as a recovering journalist, it's great to see a media business here. I loved how you were talking about how you can't just show prospective users acquisition messages off the bat. You'll turn them off. You're looking at mid-funnel, using newsletters. That's awesome. How do you deal with top of funnel? Like, I'm trying to imagine you in a meeting telling John Micklethwaite and Michael Bloomberg, oh, Bloomberg has an awareness problem. No one knows who Bloomberg is. Like, that's insane. But like, there's something to top of funnel. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think great question, and I think it starts with qualitative research that is done really well. And it almost goes back to one of the earlier points that I raised around Bloomberg is very well known, but it's well known for the terminal business, right? How do we start to raise awareness for the fact that we have a consumer-facing subscription product? That's where there is more awareness opportunity. And actually, it's around that, in my opinion, you start with the data. You demonstrate pre-brand campaign through both qual and quant that there is an opportunity to raise awareness more specifically around our subscription-based offerings. Launch a brand campaign that demonstrates not just success within platforms like Facebook, OTT, all that good stuff, right? But then complement that with actual business-facing metrics. How are we demonstrating that when you have brand in market, people are more likely to come to the website when you don't have brand in market, right? Linking your brand campaigns to brand landing pages that actually continue the journey, because when you go to Bloomberg.com, there's a lot of content, right? How do we reframe how to maybe take the most advantage of the content that's on the site by articulating what are all of those offerings, and not the incentive isn't sign up for a product, right? It's actually learn more. Like, let us help you learn more about what it is that we do so you can get the most value when you're actually ready to sign up for that product, right? And so I think a lot of it starts with the data, and then it also starts with how do you use that brand messaging to make your acquisition pool more efficient. Because when you think about all of those new users that are getting to our website, we're growing our retargeting efforts. We're reaching people that we hadn't otherwise reached, and now we're more likely to take those users down the funnel. And one of my other things is search intent, right? So when you look at branded search terms, pre-campaign versus post-campaign, you're starting to see really significant lifts. And then I also like to look at specific acquisition numbers. And so over that time period, how is your CPA fluctuating once you actually have gotten a user exposed to a brand message and now you can bring them down? And the numbers are significant. And so I think it's a great point that you raised. I think we've worked really hard to frame the data in a way that lends itself to solving a more specific awareness problem. And I think some of the, in my opinion, the best brand campaigns are brands that connect a larger ambition to a product. And that's the job of these brand campaigns, is how do we connect this bigger picture? By the way, Bloomberg, donates all of our profit to philanthropy around the world. And we've got this really great product that can help you be smarter, help you have better conversations, and help you invest better.
Any other questions?
Thank you. In regards to what is happening in the marketplace now, how would, be it, the finance and the predictions as to what's going to happen in the financial markets as well as real estate, how do you find new subscribers, or how do you attract, since the way that you might have targeted in the past, even over the past year, is greatly changing? How are you finding the way that you move forward in the future to build your business and find new consumers? How is it evolving?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because from a demand perspective, typically when you see economic volatility, there's actually much greater demand for a Bloomberg-based product, right? Mm-hmm. Like, consumers have more of a reason to actually come to the website. And so I think one of the focuses is really around content, right? So how are you making sure that Wealth, for example, is a really interesting brand that we have within the portfolio where you start to think about personal investing, right? Maybe you're scaling up some of your content around personal investing. What would you do with $1,000 if you can invest it in the market today? So I think it's capitalizing on the demand and the curiosity of the unknown and making sure that you're able to provide that consumer with some value once they actually get to the website or off-site so they know how to better face the economic volatility, the economic downturn. I think I've been in industries where it's really different, right? Like, you know, I've worked at American Express. When the financial markets are tightening and you're more constrained, demand is inherently going down because people are spending less. I think in our industry, demand actually increases in those moments of volatility.
And do you find yourself looking forward to finding these new consumers and exploring different ways of finding these new subscribers?
Absolutely.
As the market changes?
Absolutely. I think it's always fascinating to understand consumer behavior and how consumer behavior differs from platform to platform. And I think one of the things that I get most excited about is how are you actually delivering more value, right, to those users, and how are you helping more people to see the value of our offering and watching that help to grow our subscriber base. And so that's one of the great things about media and what Bloomberg does is, we are a well-respected journalist publication that is backed by data, and we put that at the core of everything that we do. And democratizing access to that information is something that makes me feel really good at the end of the day.
That actually made me think of a question for you.
Keep them coming.
So how are you viewing consumer behavior? What kind of data are you looking at? Are you looking at your own data, or have you integrated some form of AI to be able to view that?
Yeah, I think we're looking at a variety of different sources of data. I think starting with our own data, using AI to really think about consumption and what consumers are more likely to consume as shifts within the market happen, and then thinking about how you actually place that content on the right place within the website to meet that consumer demand. I'd say we're also looking at off-site data and data outside of our own data, really looking at competitive spend trends, right? Non-competitive spend trends, really thinking about understanding the marketplace more holistically so we're primed to make the right investments in the long term.
Sure. Looks like we have another question. Microphone. Am I getting the hook? Last question. All right.
No karaoke. I promise no karaoke.
Sing us a song to end it.
Yeah.
It's better than the way I'm going to be able to
You
end
all
it,
don't
so.
want to hear that, trust me. Hey, my name's Ryan. Thanks so much for what you were talking about, both of you. I really heard a lot of consumer-facing sort of language, but the undercurrent that I was really hearing a lot of from you was sort of the purpose of Bloomberg, right? Journalism is meant to serve a certain purpose. Brand purpose is a big topic in a lot of marketing conversations these days. It sounds like that is very much at the forefront of what you're doing, but from a data perspective, you mentioned MMM and lots of personalization components. Are you thinking about brand purpose? And if you are, which I assume you are, like how are you integrating that from a data perspective into what you're doing, if at all, and if you can share?
Yeah. I would say brand purpose is critical. And I think a lot of the data sources that we're using are one of the audiences that we really want to reach, just like many other brands or younger demographics, right? And so how do we tap into what is really important to those younger demographics? And more often than not, what you see is purpose-driven brands that prioritize purpose over profit are actually what that younger consumer wants to engage with. And I think one of the main things that we think about as it relates to that is the type of content or journalism that we're covering. And so one of the areas of coverage that we've recently scaled is green, really thinking about more sustainability type content, thinking about how businesses can approach sustainability today through the lens of corporate social responsibility. And so I would say brand purpose is definitely rooted at the core of what we do. It's rooted at the core of how we actually write. And then what I think our job as marketers is how do you incorporate that lens into your content in a way where you increase awareness and consideration around that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Just in closing, I think we'll have to wait and see how the industry is going to shake out and ultimately see how that cookie will crumble.
And hopefully you know now why Bloomberg employs me. Thank you, everyone.
Here?